Calling this meeting to order. This is the Citizens Budget Advisory Council. My name is Nathan Bourne. Due to the governor's order, all members of the Citizens Budget Advisory Council are participating virtually. For virtual meetings, committee members and guests will be muted until asked to be heard. At that time, they will be recognized and can unmute. When there is a vote, it will be necessary to take a roll call vote. A committee member will be recognized and state their vote. Today's meeting is a public meeting. The meeting will also be live streamed on the city's YouTube channel, which can be accessed at cityofws.org/2682/video. A recording of today's meeting will be available by next Tuesday on the city's website, cityofws.org. All right, so the first order of business is to approve the minutes from the last meeting. So has everyone had an opportunity to look over those? Are there any questions? I don't see, all right. So if there's no discussion, no questions, motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, motion carried. Minutes are approved. Thank you, guys. And
Nathan, we actually have to do a roll call approval.
oh, okay.
As
all right.
well as will serve as the attendance as well. So I can just, you want to call everybody's name? You can see everyone.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll call everybody's name. So we've got Ross Griffith.
I approve.
Okay, Sheila.
I approve.
Jesse.
Hear and approve.
Dr. Schuler.
Approve.
Okay.
Okay, that's unanimous.
All right, super. So I'll turn it back over to you, Patrice.
Okay. My computer is moving a little slow today, so forgive me. Okay, all right. So today we are going to review the Winston-Salem Police Department's budget. As you recall, at our last meeting, and kind of the theme for this fiscal year for this committee is to look at the impact of kind of the race relations, social unrest, and what that has on the budget. If you kept up with any of the media or watched any of the Public Safety Committee meetings, or even watched as the budget was adopted last fiscal year, you know that there was some civil unrest, and there were also calls to defund police, and there are continues to be calls to defund police. And so in response to that, the Mayor Pro Tem Adams requested that we take a deep dive into the police budget. And in doing so, we had a lot of citizens just interested. You know, there was calls to defund police, and all people saw was that the police budget had a $78 million budget. That seems like a lot. And so being able to just see exactly the details of the budget, a drill down to see, is there really money to defund? And not only defund, some people are calling to reallocate the resources. So to see what's in the budget, to see if money could be shifted to do more de-escalation training, to look at potentially adding some mental health resources, a different type of response team for officers when they respond to calls. And so just a number of efforts. And so what I'll do today is share with you the presentation that we shared with the public about the police department's budget, a true deep dive into what's in this $78 million budget. And so this is informal. Once again, this would be similar if we were sitting around the table in the conference room. So feel free on any slide to stop me, to intervene, to ask questions, or to give comments at any given time. I'll go through this. I want to thank Stephen Haverlick, my deputy director, and Sarah Coffey for putting a lot of this information together. And so at any time, they may want to jump in as well. So you see that the mission of the police department is to protect life and property by providing exceptional municipal police services to the community in partnership with the citizens of Winston-Salem. That mission is in our budget document as well. You'll also see in our budget document, we have strategic focus areas. So we have about 5 or 6 strategic focus areas. One of those areas is safe and secure communities. So when you go to that tab in our budget document, or essentially online, you'll see a section that says safe and secure community. There you'll find police, fire, and emergency management under that focus area. Of course, today we're talking about police, and you'll see an overview of police and then some objectives. And these objectives and priorities come from our strategic plan. So we try to do a good job of aligning our budget with the strategic plan. And so on each page, each section of the focus area, you'll see some objectives and short and midterm priorities. So in this case of police, we have expand community policing as one objective, and to reduce the fear of crime, to reduce crime and the fear of crime. The short-term priorities are to expand the police department's community engagement, retain qualified personnel, strengthen re-entry and diversion initiatives. And then under midterm is to evaluate public safety, driver training needs, develop a plan for police district realignment, and to increase public safety data collection and analysis. So I've added a link to the city's strategic plan document. And after this meeting, I can email you this presentation. So if you are interested in clicking on any of the links, you can do that after the meeting. So this slide shows the just kind of the big picture of our city, and it's divided up by districts. So you'll see the light green section here is District 2. This is more of the eastern side of the city. This light gray area is District 1. This is kind of the northern portion of the city. And then you see District 3, and that's this light yellowish color here, which is more kind of southwest. So we have the Public Safety Center, which sits right in the center of the city here. And then we have the 3 district stations that you may have seen at some point. These are fairly new. One's at North Point Boulevard, one's on Walltown Street, and District 3 is on Winter Haven Lane. We also have other facilities. We have a special operations division, which is up here in the northern part of the town, a joint firearms training facility, which you can see here, the downtown bike patrol, that's obviously downtown, more in the center of the city. And in our Beatty Public Safety Center, there's a training and support facility. And then we have our transportation facility for police. So So the purpose of this presentation, well, not the purpose, but the format of the presentation is going to be from big picture to drilling down to each of these bureaus. And it's divided up based on how the org chart looks for the police department. So you have the chief of police, obviously at the top. You have your professional standards division, support services bureau, investigative services bureau, and then the field services bureau here. So as I go through the presentation, we'll go through each of these areas in detail in terms of their budget. And the org chart you'll see will be repeated. Okay. So looking at just the big picture, I'm sorry, these things keep popping up over here. Looking at the big picture police department for the entire department. So we'll start at the entire department and break it down by bureau. You can see we have a $78.7 million budget. This is what the community sees. You'll hear people talking about this huge budget, which sounds huge. But what you'll notice as we go through the presentation, or I'll just tell you, is it's mainly salaries. It's personnel is the biggest driver of this budget. Those divisions that you saw in the org chart are here, and I'll go through each of those in a minute. And then that totals up to personnel when you look at division. But then when you look at the budget by category, it's the same total, it's just divided up by category. In this chart, you'll see, as I mentioned, personnel, that's 83% of the budget. Then you have your operating costs, capital outlay, transfers out, and other funds, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then just on the revenue side of the overall budget, this is where the resources come in to fund the police budget. So you have just small charges for services. These are police court services, interfund, which means this is the DWI task force grant and maybe other grants. We have revenue that comes in from Forsyth County, and that is due to a forensic services. We have a city county forensic services, arrestee processing, and evidence management. So this is the county's portion of that. We had, at the time of budget adoption, budgeted revenues for our school resource officers. That program has actually ended at this point. And that was basically due to school was out because of the virus, and this was actually being phased out anyway, so this was just an expedited into that program. Then we have a false alarm fee, miscellaneous. These are just reimbursements from insurance proceeds or lab fees and things like that. And then our largest source of revenue for police is obviously the general fund. This is pretty much where our tax dollars come from. So 75 million out of the $78 million police budget is from our taxes. And then other funds would be grants and our 911 system fund. So when we look at the entire police department, this is what the staffing looks like for police. So total 541 sworn personnel, 171 non-sworn personnel, and 712 total personnel. And you can see how that's divided up by division. Your field services division has the largest number of sworn staff, and that's where you have your patrol, your police officers, most of them. Okay, So I just gave you a big picture of the entire police department. So now what we'll do is, remember the org chart we saw earlier? We will take a deeper dive into each of these sections based on the org chart that you saw earlier by division. So if we break this down, we'll start with administration. And so administration includes the police chief's office as well as professional standards. So in the police chief's office, they administer and direct law enforcement services delivery. They establish policies and evaluates deployment strategies. And then under professional standards, they investigate complaints against employees. So any complaint against an officer or any other staff, this professional standards division handles that. These administration has 12 sworn personnel, 7 non-sworn personnel, so a total of 19 people working in this administration division. The budget for administration is $3.7 million. Most of it, once again, is personnel, 62%. For operating, you have 1.3. So what's in that is police supplies. And so these are supplies that are purchased throughout the department, basic supplies, uniforms, ammunition, flashlights, things like that. And then you have facility maintenance, and that just covers the cost of that public safety center, which is now named Vivian H. Burke Public Safety Center. So that's what those costs are for. Moving on to field services, that was that 4th section on our org chart. You have your patrol. This is what most people are familiar with, is 24-hour response to calls for services in those beats that I showed you earlier on the map. They also provide community-oriented policing. Then you have your special operations section, and this is special coverage. This also includes the foot patrol downtown, park rangers in our city parks and greenways, as well as things like traffic control. So that's what this Field Services Bureau. This is where you have 400 sworn personnel. So these are your police officers in uniforms that the community is familiar with, and 3 non-sworn. This is the budget for field services. So it's $42 million. 86% of that is staff, is your personnel cost. 3.8 is for operating and capital outlay. So for operating, when you break that 3.8 million down, is for vehicle maintenance and repairs. So, you know, police officers' cars are really used, and there's a lot of wear and tear on the vehicles. And so pretty much a lot of that is for maintenance or repairs of those cars. And then they also have automatic vehicle locators on each of the cars, and that tracks the officers' whereabouts, and we keep up with them with GIS technology. Obviously, the cars need fuel, so we've got fuel costs. It's almost $1 million. Contractual services. This is where officers have to have the body cameras and tasers. We also have to maintain storage of those cameras. There's a warranty and maintenance plan. And then we have about $73,000 towards the State Division of Criminal Information. It's called DCI, and that's where officers have to access information when they stop a car or they run in a criminal report. And then there's a charge for patrol to access this information on their laptops. For capital outlay, there's installment purchase payments for the equipment, which those include the vehicle replacements, vehicle package, radars, body cameras, tasers, motorcycles, vehicles, you name it, all the things that police need. And then transfers out, this is the DWI Task Force local match grant to the grant. So as you see in one of the largest divisions, there's no real, there's no fluff at all. I mean, the resources here, $42 million is budgeted with no real room, mainly going to personnel costs. But as you see, all the personnel needs the equipment and things to do their job. I'll just take a moment to see if anybody has any questions currently, and I'll continue. Okay. Moving on to this section here is the Investigative Services Bureau. Got a 155 staff in this section. 103 are sworn, 52 are non-sworn. So the Criminal Investigations Divisions, they do the narcotics investigations, device gambling and organized crime, those major crimes here. They also have a Family and Youth Division, which handles domestic violence cases and victim assistance. They also have a Project Safe Neighborhood. Under the Forensic Services is that's the Consolidated City County Service. They're responsible for crime scene processing and collection of evidence, arrestee processing, and administration of breath and blood alcohol tests. And then we have the Special Investigations Unit that manages vice and narcotics. So total budget here is 15.4 million, and 93% of that, 94% is personnel costs. 857,000 is operating, and another 117,000 for capital outlay. So this operating here is for vehicle maintenance and repairs, fuel, contracts, and then you have your capital outlay, which is to pay for equipment. And then this division uses unmarked cars for their special investigations, obviously for narcotics, and then the Forensic Services vehicles replacements and ballistic ID system. And then this last section, which I didn't do it kind of in order, it was kind of backwards, but this here, Support Services Bureau, 26 employees and that are sworn, 109 are non-sworn. So this division has more non-sworn than sworn. This is a communications division. So when you call 911, this is the division that answers your calls. They work 24 hours a day, and these are police and fire emergency 911 calls. For operations, they provide in-service firearms, driving, and use of force training, as well as BLE training, your basic law enforcement training that happens here. And then there's a records division. So there's ever a police incident or police report you need, this division processes and stores all of those records and citations. That unit budget is $15.7 million. 73.9% of that is for personnel costs. 4 million is for operating. So let's drill down in what this is. Almost $500,000 is for police transportation. This funds the vehicle bills and striping for all vehicle replacements, computer license fees, facility maintenance. So there's indoor firearms training facilities, and then the Alex Beatty Public Safety Training and Support Center. So to maintain that costs almost $1 million. We have lease lines, and that's to connect to 911, to dispatch to the fire stations. Our IS system charges, that's almost $1 million, and contractual services, that's almost $500,000 for police IS, police recruiting, background checks, access for police records desktops. And then our capital outlay obviously is for computer replacements and the information systems applications. So those were all of the divisions that you saw in the org chart. You notice that most of those were related to personnel costs, and then some operating costs, and I showed you what is in those operating costs. There was another little small section called Other, and under Other is grants funds. And so an example of one of the grants funds is the Justice Assistance Fund, which supports equipment, and then a DWI Task Force grant, which is mainly for personnel. Once the grants are received, those funds are then budgeted as awarded. Forfeiture funds throughout the year, the police department will have forfeiture funds to use to purchase various items like equipment, canine expenses, and they a lot of times use it for officer training. The federal government allows law enforcement to seize money or property that is involved in a crime. So that's where the forfeiture funds come from. They are reported to the state and then distributed back to the local law enforcement program. And as they are received, those are awarded, and they go in the form of a contract, budget amendment, and then appropriated at that time. Those funds cannot be used for operating expenses. And then we have an emergency telephone system. The budget adopted $500,000 for that. It's funded by reimbursements from the state 911 wireless board, and the expenses cover replacement of computers for the 911 communication center, and then maintenance costs of communication center equipment. So that is the budget. That is a full account of that $78 million police budget. So do you have any questions about that, or anything that's that you saw in the budget?
I have a question. This is Jesse. Is this the active budget or the proposed budget?
This is the adopted budget. This is the adopted budget for this fiscal year of 21.
Were there already any changes baked into this as a result of the social unrest?
So once this budget was adopted, there was quite a bit of public comment about defunding police, as you all probably have seen. There was a potential at one point about defund, but the council collectively decided that they did not want to defund police. And so via a resolution from one council person submitted a resolution that basically says we're not defunding police, but what they're willing to do is to give $1 million, or at least consider giving $1 million. At that time, it was just to form a committee that would review how they would spend, or make recommendations on how they would spend $1 million if they got it. If there was funding available at some point, how would they spend $1 million towards social justice or poverty issues? So that's how we kind of made it through the budget process without the budget being modified, but yet there still being a plan on funding social justice programs. But council was clear that they did not want it to come from the police budget. So since that time, we got some additional revenue, and they decided to earmark a portion of that towards the $1 million that they kind of promised this committee that they would have. So the committee came up with categories of recommendations. And so we are currently in the process of collecting applications from nonprofits who are can support social justice or equity type of programs, which is due actually Friday. And so that's how that $1 million is going to spend. Because this did not come from the police budget, we still have calls to defund the police. So to answer your question, Jesse, no, the budget was not modified through the budget process.
How much you said a part of that million's been funded and approved, or all of it?
So the budget, as you see it here, the 78 million, that is adopted and that is
Right.
untouched. The $1 million, we identified where $1 million would come from based on some additional revenue that the city received. And so that money has been earmarked for social justice or poverty programs. So that money is there and it's earmarked for that purpose. And right now we're receiving applications for nonprofits, so they will potentially use that money. So
Wasn't it, this Ross, wasn't it used for internet too, the $1 million?
So there are 5 categories. One was broad-based internet access, mainly to communities that do not have access to high-speed internet. There was a category for kind of general social justice, anti-poverty grants. There was one for long-term strategies related to social justice. There was one for mentorship and neighborhood capacity building. And I know I'm missing one. But so anyway, the committee decided just to come up with categories and pots of funding that all total up to $1 million. And so people can apply for those funds. But it is not a part of Defund Police. So that's where it's separate.
Hi, Patrice. This is Ms. Schuler. You may have said this, but I just have a question in reference to your statement when you said there's still a call out to defund the police. Exactly who's making that request? Is it the citizens or is it within our own police department?
Oh, no, not within our own police.
Okay, I'm just asking who's actually
These are cries
called.
from citizens.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it never really stopped since, there was a national cry out from George Floyd from that point on. And like I said, I mean, the remedy was to say we'll fund social justice, not defund police. We did this presentation, which was a drill down, because people were like, they have $78 million. Why can't we take some of that and use it towards social programs, social justice, and that type of thing? Once this was presented, it felt like people knew we were being transparent and they could see this level of detail about the police budget. We didn't hear a lot afterwards. People asked a lot of great questions. We actually took questions from citizens at the end of the presentation. And I put up even a web page for people to go to. But what happens is anytime there's a new situation involving police, there's then a rise in groups who are then calling for some kind of change, defund police, or reform of the police department. So,
okay. So, and I understand that as their new issues arrive, understand that part, but have we thought about, or has there been any consideration into like when new issues arise, just like from the unrest in DC, by using our website to say how we're responding, even as a city within the nation, I don't know, to keep that, maybe to minimize some of that call to defund, and then to show the public what it will actually look to defund a police. I mean, we're not going to not have police, but what happens when we start adjusting budgets and when we are paying our police, our servicemen and women less than surrounding cities? What happens? You know, what type of personnel are we left to recruit when you do such things? I don't know how far you want to open that up to the public. It's just something I'm just thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, you know, every city is handling it differently.
Right.
I recently spoke at the North Carolina Local Government Budget Association conference. There was a whole session around this topic. And so most cities are having to address it in some form. And so there was an opportunity to have a discussion around what others are doing related to this, the social unrest around police reform. And so nobody has the magic answer to it.
Exactly.
That this council has collectively kind of been clear of the intent to keep our police department whole. That does not mean they're not looking at ways to be responsive to citizens and the need to look at internal processes in response to calls. Mm-hmm. So I do believe that is happening. Okay. But in terms of the budget, you know, the budget right now has not been touched. And so, you know, there's a whole public safety committee and an assistant manager who's over public safety. And so they're probably, I know they're listening to the demands as well as council and looking probably at ways of, you know, is there anything we can do as a police department to address those concerns? But it has not come to be a budget issue yet, but we hear the cries. And so their response was this $1 million. And so we're still working through the $1 million, but people are still saying they want it to come from the police department's budget. So.
Patrice, so it looks like, and you may have already touched on this, and I may have missed it, but it looks like we already have a $1 million revenue shortfall from the Winston-Salem Forsyth County schools. So they're looking at gaining $1 million, but we've already lost $1 million. So where do we fill that gap? I mean, is that the $1 million question?
That's a great observation, Nathan. Yeah, so we would have lost $1 million in the school resource officer, but there's an expenditure to that, and that's on the personnel side. So these are people. These are. Oh,
I see. Okay, so you can offset it somehow. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, okay. These are officers. All of those officers, because there were so many vacancies in patrol, were able, if they chose to just move into patrol, and then we would eliminate, and we actually recently did just eliminated the positions. No people. We didn't have to get rid of people because we had so many vacancies. But the positions were eliminated, and so we won't have those costs, the expenditure side. But yes, excellent observation.
Out of curiosity, now that schools are going back, what are the resource officers just aren't a thing anymore? What about next year?
So the sheriff's office will.
Oh, the sheriff's office
will manage the school resource office. Okay. Which most city counties, the counties are really responsible for schools, and so they'll handle that.
Okay.
So Patrice, this is Sheila. Some of the things that I read about Defund the Police talked about reallocating budgets around training and sensitivity training, et cetera. But I would assume that would, first of all, you know, what we went through here didn't drill down to the level of training that's offered that's probably way too low level, but I was curious if there are certain like KPIs that the police department monitors to inform training and the types of changes that they might need to do in training. So if they're getting, I don't know, complaints are arising in certain areas relative to things that would inform new types of training to, I don't know, enable our officers to better address situations that are inflamed.
Yeah, so I mean, somewhere I'm sure there's some categories of training. We wouldn't list, you know, they wouldn't have to tell us specifically from a budget perspective the actual, yeah. So what is this? Support services. You can see development and training would probably fall under this. In a number of places, they would look at training. And so from our end, we typically don't drill down to a level for the chief to say, oh, tell us, you know, what you're going to do. That's something they would report to, say, Public Safety Committee, and to be kind of accountable for the types of training. I will say, I think if there's something, I can't remember that national standard about the 8 something. I know we are compliant with many of the standard trainings and not doing like the chokehold. I think we were pretty far advanced in certain training processes than most other police departments already. And so they've highlighted that. So in terms of anything new or adjusting in terms of training, I have not heard that yet. Does not mean they're not working on it or in process of it, but we would not, and the truth is a lot of times police departments need more resources for additional types of trainings or de-escalation training and things like that. And so when we talk about police reform and reducing their budget, you know, you're also reducing training, because when you reduce this budget with, you know, operating budget of 12% out of a $78 million budget, that's not much. So what's going to go is training, you know, unless you're cutting people. And people don't want to cut people, because if you call 911, you want, officer to come to your house. So it's just one of those things. It's a really a difficult situation. And see, a lot of this is body cameras and equipment and the cars they have to drive. So you don't have a lot of give in terms of definitely not cutting.
Right.
What about this concept of the militarization of police, where local law enforcement buys remanded federal military equipment, armored personnel carriers, and that such? Any of that in capital outlay for the Winston-Salem Police Department?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so right here, there are some special operations SOD vehicles that could be seen as that, Jesse. You know, this armored rescue vehicle, some of the command vehicles. And, you know, I mean, that's just a matter of perspective on, you know, what's enough, what's too much, what's being over militarized. I mean, but yes, there are a few, not many, that this police department has or would be considered military type of vehicles. But I haven't heard many people mention that in this city on a local level about being, well, maybe a couple of people have said something, but we haven't heard much. But did you have some thoughts about it? I mean, is that something?
I mean, I wanted to just kind of wondering where geographically that fits in the budget. And yeah, I don't know if there's like a capital outlay plan for that type of equipment. If, say, in 2021, we were going to buy a tank, maybe we could pause that, push that out to show some budgetary removal of, that kind of equipment that might placate the crowd, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know if there's like a plan for those kinds of purchases, or if that's already in the cards or not.
Yeah, we're getting ready to begin our budget kickoff and capital outlay plan and requests or capital equipment or CIP process. So we'll get a sense of we'll know exactly what people are requesting related to capital outlay. If that's one of your recommendations, I'll be glad to jot that down to say maybe no equipment that would present some kind of over militarization of the police, or the perception of that, to delay any type of equipment purchase related to that.
And I was thinking that would make a great field trip. Check out this new tank the city.
We know you like the field trips, Nathan. I would have taken you all out had COVID not shown up, but maybe at some point. But yes, they have quite a bit that would be of interest to see, actually.
If they were to request, an increase in capital outlays for that kind of equipment, does that go to city council or any kind of budgetary committee, or is that all handled in-house? I mean, if you did want to shine some sort of oversight light onto that aspect of the budget, is that possible, or is that all, down in the weeds and you don't really get that kind of visibility?
We do review it at a staff level initially. Departments submit their requests and their needs. We look at capacity for what we can add on in terms of equipment based on debt that's fallen off, and a lot of these equipment is financed through like a internal lease purchase program that we have. Based on the capacity and the request, budget does make a recommendation. It goes up to senior management and city manager's office to review and make their recommendations. At the end of the day, everything goes to council. Now, it's not reviewed publicly. I'm not going through during the budget workshops through individual pieces of equipment, but they have access to it. So, I mean, if it's something of concern or they want to go through the details, council finance committee first has definitely that prerogative to go through those details. So this may not be highlighted unless it's kind of pulled out and there be a point made about it.
Hey, Patrice, this is all, I think you said a transparency tour in response to calls to defund the police. Were there increases in cost to the police related to the social unrest or COVID, or was it just within the budget of these people were directed to go work in this space?
Tell me a little bit more about that question. When you say these people,
I'm just wondering, did you have to pull officers in to work overtime because of the social unrest things that would have caused personnel cost increases above what was budgeted? Has COVID caused some types of things that would cause decreases in productivity that would require you to increase the number of people on staff? Has there been increased sick costs, things like that?
Okay, yeah. That's a great question, Sheila, and we'll probably see a huge impact this current year. The police department, though, even prior to the events of 2020, was understaffed. There were things happening nationally even prior to George Floyd's death that was causing issues with retention and being able to retain officers. And so some of it was pay. And so, but we were losing officers to surrounding cities. And if for various reasons, I think we always assume it's pay. And so for the last, say, five probably fiscal years, public safety has gotten a special 2% supplemental pay. All except for last year, because we were in this huge budget crunch. And when we got additional revenue mid-year, public safety got a 1% increase that they just got starting this pay period. So they have been short-staffed for quite some time. And yes, anything like this kind of enhances that. And so overtime, yes. So these officers have been working overtime. There obviously increased costs related to overtime. The fact that there are vacant positions help offset that some. So you can't fill so many positions. Say you've got 20 positions that just chronically you can't fill. Well, we budget all of those positions. So there is some salary savings that then help to go to offset the overtime costs for the officers that have to fill in. So yeah, you probably saw additional officers if there are protests and things like that, special units out during this time. So yes, there will be some overtime costs for sure. Now the CARES Act funds came in, and so we got a little bit of relief from that. And so we'll be able to reconcile all of that come into this fiscal year. There'll be some projections, some year projections on some of those costs. And so we will have a true full fiscal year picture of the impact of this by then.
Patrice, what are the next steps for our council?
That's a great question, Ross. It's totally up to council. You know, they kind of determine which direction they want to go in. A lot of the information around police obviously goes to the Public Safety Committee, which is the 4 council members chaired by Councilmember James Taylor. And so
I'm sorry, I was actually asking about our council. What are the next steps for our council?
Oh, for you talking about this committee?
Yes, this committee.
Oh, this committee. Nothing. You all can listen. Like Jesse kind of threw out a recommendation. I don't know if this will be an official one, but to just look at, you know, our capital outlay, look at any equipment that would be perceived by the community as some kind of being over militarized in some form and maybe delaying that type of equipment purchase. That could go into the form of a recommendation from this committee. I know Sheila has submitted some information that could end up going into some form of a recommendation. So right now it's just kind of listening, hearing what the issues are related to citizens, the unrest, knowing just kind of from a budget perspective where we are and what we're hearing, and then making recommendations at the end of all of this that will then go to the Finance Committee.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So that is the goal. So there's one more component that I'll just go through really quick. What time is it? Okay, so we got 6 minutes. Sarah kind of pulled together some benchmarking information. And so I did share this as well with the committee. And so this is just a comparison of other cities. You'll see the year is 2018 and 19, and that's because to capture a full year of data from other cities is always kind of a year behind. And so we'll be working on now for 19 and 20. So it's always when you see kind of benchmarking data to capture it, they do data cleaning. The School of Government is the lead on this data project, the benchmarking project. And so some really great information in here. But for this particular comparison, we looked at Raleigh and Greensboro. Greensboro being probably the most comparable to Winston-Salem. Then you had a lot of smaller cities like Apex, Chapel Hill, Greenville. But then we use a larger city just to kind of do some comparison. And you can kind of see Raleigh has almost 800 officers and we have 558 officers.
They look really efficient in comparison to Greensboro.
Yes, yeah, we have less sworn officers compared to our population. Yeah.
And number of calls dispatched. Our guys are getting it.
Yeah, we're about the same, same number of calls dispatched pretty much. And then, right, less officers. You're right. So basically the same thing you're saying, Sheila. I mean, the sworn officers per 10,000 per population, the average is 23. And when I say average, this is the average of all of the benchmark participants. And so we're right at average, slightly below Greensboro. Raleigh would be, just based on their population, below average. Number of calls dispatched per 1,000. Winston is higher than the other two, but still below the average when you look at all of the cities. Number of calls dispatched per sworn.
Is that cities in North Carolina, Patrice? I apologize.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
See this little footnote here? They're not all of them. This only the ones participating in the benchmarking project.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so it's not, everybody doesn't participate, but there is a list of the benchmarking participants. Okay, calls per call dispatched. So
Just one more question, sorry.
No
Does
problem.
Charlotte skew the results?
They can, absolutely, yeah. And so that's why we didn't show them in these, so it was Greensboro and Raleigh. But when you look at the average, Charlotte's in there, but you also have Apex, so I think it's a good average to look at, but we're more concerned about, say, a Greensboro that's more in line with kind of where we are, so you can kind of get a true sense of kind of where we are. So cost per call dispatch, yes, we are efficient with that. So we only spend $359 per call dispatch compared to Greensboro, who spends $403. So the average is 282, but we are doing good compared to Greensboro and to Raleigh. Response time to high priority calls in minutes. We do a really good job of that. The average is 5.6 minutes and we do 3.9 minutes. So that's excellent.
Yeah.
Part 1 crimes per 1,000. This is hard to interpret this here. So part 1 crimes are the serious crimes, the murders, the rape, robberies, burglaries, and thefts. So we have 86.7 part 1 crimes per 1,000 population. The average is 37.3. So that is really high. there's a note here that this is based on how the reporting was done. And so cities were reporting this differently. And so, you know, if you come to a scene and you're there for burglary, and then, but there's also, I don't know, an assault or robbery, all of that gets counted in Winston's calls, but it's saying Greensboro at the time, they may not have been counting all 3 crimes in that one call, is the way I understand it. But currently, starting this year, starting January 1st, all of the cities are using this incident-based reporting. And so their numbers will look higher on this chart, so. Yeah, and the same thing here. So it looks high, but I think these 2 charts will look much different when they start using the IBR reporting. So that is it. That's it for police.
Well,
I just have one. I just have one question. You may or may not have the answer to this, but before the civil unrest, are you aware of as to how many new hires the police department was hiring on a regular basis before the social unrest? And if so, has that number changed?
I don't know that.
Okay.
Ms. Sheila, but we can look that up. I mean, we can find.
I know some of that, Patrice.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'll go back all the way to Ferguson, Missouri. Pre-Ferguson, classes routinely in the 40 to 50 range. Sometimes 2 classes a year. You get a lot of new hires. Post-Ferguson, it was a struggle to get, in some instances, 30 recruits that met the hiring and testing criteria. Prior to the, I would say, if you want to call it the next phase of civil unrest, which would be George Floyd, and post that. And that's just a timestamp, not to diminish anything that happened between those events. If we got a class of 40, we were really happy. Usually a class of 40 will graduate 34 or 35, just based on normal attrition through rookie school. But that wouldn't be consistent, even with heavy investments in recruiting and target recruiting to different parts of the country. There'd still be some instances where we'd have a class of 25 or a class of 30, all while happening when police officers reaching retirement age that started with the city at a time when we were running 2 40-person classes simultaneously. So the rate of attrition versus the rate of new hires was not happening at all, which has led to our kind of structural vacancy issue that we are still facing. And it's not unique just to Winston-Salem. That's a police departments across the country issue.
Okay, thank you.
Patrice, will we get a copy of the deck?
I'll email you all a copy of the presentation.
Thank you.
Anything else?
And what did you say this data is from? Is 2 years data? The comparative data?
From fiscal year 18 through 19.
Okay, so 1 year-ish.
Yep.
Have you had interactive discussions with any of Greensboro or local municipalities about the impact of the social unrest and COVID to them?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. We had at a recent conference, local government budgeting conference, and that everybody's faced with the exact same deal is very progressive, in their approach to target some of these issues. And they're doing some strategies even internally around equity in the budgeting process. Let's see. And then Charlotte, they have a whole kind of a equity and inclusion department, but they use their citizen committee to come up with recommendations about the police department. Our citizen committee only made recommendations about how to spend $1 million, but he mentioned, you know, yes, that the citizens wanted a team approach on response to police calls for specific certain ones, that you can have a social worker or so ride with the officer that may know better how to de-escalate a situation, or they had about 5 topics. I have some notes on it that the citizens came up with, and they're going to look at, I guess, through their budget process, what is reasonable to implement and add. So they're having those discussions now. So everything is still kind of evolving in most of the cities, and people are trying to figure out what to do. From my understanding, no one that I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve or Heather, has defunded police in North Carolina. Not in the sense that they reduced their police budget that I recall hearing about. So they may reallocate, and they may look at ways to reallocate, but no true defund.
The timing of that becoming an issue was, I think, part of it. You know, defund the police was that May or June? You know, our fiscal year budget calendar was kind of we were very into the process. Whereas if it had become an issue in the forefront, say March or April, it'd be interesting to see how things would have, how the discussions may have been. North Carolina is unique also in that some of the going further past defund the police is reallocate toward social services or mental health. Those are county functions. And so you're bringing a whole nother elected body, another government into that potential discussion. And so I don't know which way is the right answer or not, but that's just further complicates it here in North Carolina for Forsyth County and Winston-Salem and similar counties and cities.
Heather, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say that as of like when we were planning the conference a month ago, so in December, you were correct that I don't think anyone else has specifically defunded police yet in North Carolina. There's conversations in a number of jurisdictions, and whether those conversations focus on defunding or reallocating. So there are people talking about it, but I don't think anyone has done anything yet.
Right. Okay. Y'all are so engaged in this. This is great. Yeah, but Mr. Griffith, I mean, to your question earlier, you know, I know probably before it was probably more active and you thought as a committee member, but this year, you know, we're socially distancing. It's really just reviewing the budget issues, and we kind of defined this topic this year because it is an evolving issue that's real, and just listening to kind of where we are, what the budget looks like. The next session, I'll review the early budget forecast, and that's something I will have presented to council the day before we meet. And so you'll be able to see kind of what we're looking at, what kind of budget gap, and also being aware of the social issues that put pressure on our budget, or potentially could put pressure on our budget. So just kind of hearing and observing, and if there are any thoughts or recommendations from you all that you would like to see go to the finance committee, which is council, to, you all can definitely present that. They respect it. They listen to the reports and things that we can implement or change based on the recommendations you all give. We definitely do our best. So.
Sounds good.
Okay. I'll turn it back to you, Chair Nathan, and not your physical chair, but chairman.
No, that was a great presentation. We appreciate that, Patrice. Thank you very much. All right, so the next meeting is Tuesday, February 9th, 3 o'clock. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, so meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.